Welcome back to Those Happy Places, the podcast that treats theme parks, rides, and attractions like literature. I'm Buddy Duquesne.
And I'm Alice White.
Or should we say, those spooky places?
Those spooky places, indeed, because this is yet another Halloween episode.
Yay, it's Halloween time!
Our favorite time of year, Halloween.
Halloween is such an important, it has such an important impact on themed spaces. I mean, like, we've got a couple of great theme park field reports that we're going to share today, but we also kind of want to talk about what Halloween does for theming and, like, where the theming of Halloween comes from, and how to read that and what it means for us kind of culturally speaking. So this is really going to be an exciting episode, Alice.
Yeah, it's going to be really good. So let's start with Halloween in general and the origins of some of the really iconic imagery that comes along with it.
Yeah, so Halloween kind of started as a harvest festival. It's widely believed that Halloween traditions started as Celtic or Celtic harvest festivals, particularly a festival known as Samhain. Am I pronouncing that right? Samhain? And Alice, I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I am an expert in history and the history of Halloween in particular, and that I completely understand these old Celtic traditions. But a lot of these things that we consider Halloweeny kind of come from these old pagan harvest festivals that were, over time kind of Christianized and then passed through the ages, which is, I guess, part of what makes Halloween feel so natural. So absolutely fundamental to our understanding of the cycle of the year.
Oh, right. So much of our imagery that we have this time of year centers around things from harvest festivals and from celebrations like Samhain. We celebrate things like crops and gourds. We have corn, and we have rich foods, and we have it becomes like this celebration of the plenty that we get from a good harvest. And in addition, it also, because it falls in the season of fall, at least here in the northern hemisphere, fall is the end of summer and the beginning of winter, where things start to die, where trees start to change, the weather starts to get colder, and it represents to us the ending of a year, and this last celebration of plenty before we buckle down for the winter. And it can represent a lot of things to a lot of people, including things like death and dying and catharsis, and this and this feeling of closure almost for the year.
Yeah, and that's kind of an interesting concept, because we think of winter as the end of the year, right? Like the darkest, longest nights of winter are kind of how we close the year, and then the calendar starts over and it's January again, and then the days progressively get longer until eventually it's summer. But the thing, Alice, that I find interesting is that we consider Halloween this very death-centric holiday. There's a lot of connection, not necessarily to spirituality in like the religious sense, but kind of a spiritualism, like this idea that the spirits are around us and that they kind of come out to play on Halloween. And there's connections to lots of other historical traditions that kind of place that sort of thing in the fall months.
Right. It partly comes from the connection to the Christian celebration of All Souls Day, and which has become which has changed places in the calendar year over the course of the last couple of millennia, which is why we get this narrative that Samhain and other festivals like that were turned into All Souls Day as part of the Christianization of pagan worlds. And so those holidays being so intimately tied together are where we get some of that idea.
Right, and it's an interesting phenomenon because it's not. Fall is not the time of the dying. It is like the time of the beginning of the dying, if that makes any sense. And I don't mean to be flippant about it, but early pagans would have been not struggling as fall began. The struggle would come later. So to kind of preempt the struggle and the death that winter can bring, with kind of a celebration that is very focused on kind of spookiness and spirits and things like that, is kind of a weird human phenomenon. It's this thing where you want to kind of get it all out of your system and maybe even kind of laugh at it, or maybe laugh with it, acknowledge that winter is coming and that hardship and death may come with it, as kind of a preparation for that reality, by kind of saying, but haha, it's happening now for us and we're having fun with it. We beat you, winter. We gamed the system.
Yeah, it's like taking control of your own destiny, of your own feelings. Like we humans will always find a way to celebrate.
Yeah.
Because that's who we are.
Even if the thing that we have to look forward to is grim, we'll find a way to make it fun. And I think that's a big part of what makes Halloween so enduring, is that, like, yeah, winter is kind of less of a big deal in terms of like survival, but winter is still tough in many other ways. And Halloween kind of feels like a last great shakeout of the fun summer stuff so that we can prepare to buckle down for winter.
We say that here in California, where we don't really experience that severe of winter.
Well, Alice, here in the great wild north of the Bay Area, California, it does indeed dip towards 40 degrees Fahrenheit.
Oh, no.
I know, Alice. I once woke up with a bit of frost on my windshield and had to wait 2 minutes for it to defrost.
Oh, goodness.
It was indeed a difficult time.
But despite the fact that we don't personally understand ancient hardships and harvests and whatnot, we still maintain those ancient traditions and that cultural identity, at least here in the West. And we spend an entire month of October dedicating ourselves to these ideas and this imagery. I know that I spent most of the month trying to watch old horror movies that I missed in my life, and try to inject a little bit of spooks and scares into my day-to-day life this whole month.
Yeah, it's interesting because of the sort of religious connotations of original Halloween, that we have kind of this highly secularized, very commercial, and yet like almost just as important way of celebrating, that includes subjecting ourselves to spooks and scares. And maybe even remembering old spooks and scares by like watching classic horror films, and kind of joining in a collective sense of wanting to do spooking and scaring. And spooks and scares is how we're gonna address them, I think, Alice, because I really like saying it as a phrase.
Me too.
So that brings us to kind of the nature of Halloween and the current Halloween traditions that we observe, and the sort of contrast between Halloween and other holidays, because it's not as if Halloween exists in this vacuum. Halloween is kind of the beginning of what many people consider the holiday season. In that it kind of begins the long trek towards Christmas, at least in the capitalistic sense, right? Like on November 1st, out comes the Christmas decorations. We practically jump right over Thanksgiving. But what is Halloween? What do we do on Halloween that's special and specific? And Alice, for me, the difference between Halloween and other holidays comes down to other holidays feel very private, where Halloween feels very public.
Halloween, yeah, it's more of a social celebration. We go out, we knock on doors, we dress up and go to parties. it's a celebrate with your friends holiday, whereas Thanksgiving and Christmas are celebrate at home with your immediate family holidays.
Yeah, and I think some of that might actually come down to weather necessities and things like that, where Halloween might be one of the last seasonably warm nights that we have before, the onset of true winter. And some of it may also come down to this idea that Halloween is connected to the harvest festivals and kind of needing everybody on hand to get the harvest done, and then you could party afterwards. But our current traditions kind of maintain that connection by saying Halloween is the one night of the year where you knock on strangers' doors. I can't imagine another holiday adding that as a component. There are other holidays that we have that have social components, right? Like, I'm imagining, at least in the United States, we have 4th of July. There's a lot of going out where everybody else is and like watching fireworks. That's like a thing, right? We all grill maybe in a public place or a beach or a park, right?
It's not. It's different somehow.
It feels way different. Halloween's almost transgressive in how public it is. Like, my house is going to be bombarded by a bunch of people who presumably live near me. I have no idea, because I don't go knocking on their doors regularly. And they're going to be seeking candy that I hope I have at that point. Alice, I'm just remembering I haven't bought anything. But like, that barrier is going to be broken down. I'm going to clean my living room before Halloween because I'm embarrassed.
It's surprising how those barriers come down, and we just accept it here, at least again here in America. We just accept it as this is the day of the year. This is the day where we get to meet everyone in the neighborhood, and being outside late at night for children, for adults, for everybody is totally okay and acceptable. But I guess because it's like a Halloween season, because it's a harvest season or fall, have stretched it to take over not just the one night, but for several weeks on either end, where you get things like a harvest festival or a pumpkin patch or a haunted hay rides or anything like that just pop up around your town as like mini small businesses where you can just pay a little money to enjoy this this extra bit of social activity that is seasonal and important, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we have other things over the course of the year that are temporary themed experiences, right? Like I imagine the state fair, the local carnival, things like that, where there are rides and games, and it's kind of a festival atmosphere for sure. But Halloween seems like a month-ish that is dedicated to this specific aesthetic that is fairly universal, at least nationwide here in the States, that everybody kind of expects the arrival of these temporary themed spaces. And that's really unique. I mean, what other holiday has this? Christmas, maybe a little, like with Santa Claus showing up at malls. But that kind of pales in comparison to the scale of what Halloween provides.
It also is very age specific. Like, we're not going to visit Santa Claus. We grow out of that.
Right.
Whereas a certain Halloween experiences you're into as a kid, and then maybe you're too cool for school as a teen, but now as an adult you're getting back into them. Like things like going apple picking or visiting a theme park that's been themed up for spooks and scares. Like all the major theme parks now have these Halloween events, and those are very appealing to people of a lot of different ages. But we as adults can go back to these theme parks and enjoy them just as much as we as kids enjoyed trick-or-treating, for example.
Yeah.
It definitely feels like the one holiday I could think of off the top of my head that literally anybody can get into.
Yeah, Halloween is very all-inclusive in a lot of different ways. And the way in which I think it is the most interestingly inclusive is the way that it says to its audience, which is all of us because we live where Halloween is celebrated, but it says to everybody, be part of this in some way. Either get spooked and scared or make the spooks and scares. And I think that's really interesting. Halloween's invitation is not coming from a central authority, but kind of from the nature of the holiday itself. It says, like, how into this do you want to be? Do you want to be an audience? Do you want to be a presenter? And then what do you want to bring to the table? So, Alice, a story that I love to tell is when I was a kid, there was a neighbor I had that would go all out. Like, there would be a maze that they set up on their driveway with like PVC pipes and like trash bags almost. I don't really know how to describe it. But you'd have to go through the maze, and then at the end of the maze, which had like all sorts of spooky noises and flashing lights in it, at the end of the maze, there was the candy bowl. But my neighbor had a gate in front of their house. They were one of the only houses in the neighborhood with a gate. And they would be dressed as like a specter, and their hands would be on the gate, and they'd be like floating there over the candy bowl. And if you wanted candy, you had to brave that spooky scariness. And I always wondered, like, okay, that's a lot, right? That's like hours of work and a commitment to detail and to the spooks and the scares that is actually impressive. And I've never been able to pull off that level of commitment to Halloween, but I always find it really impressive when people do. Not as a business, not as a way to make money or even to get renown, but just as like, this is something I'm going to do because it's right for the holiday. It's what we do. We share the spooks together. And that's just, that there's something really pure and like fun about that, that no other holiday says. You go out and share your Christmas tradition with everybody, or like,
right.
It's because you're not supposed to invite people into your home for Christmas. That's like a closed thing. Halloween is open. Halloween is exciting. Maybe Halloween is also an invitation to act out our fears in a safe way, and just kind of act along and be like, ooh, this is scary, so that we can laugh and pretend and have a good time, while our real fears are kind of pushed to the back of our minds for this day. Right.
For the day, we can be afraid of like vampires and werewolves and monsters and laughing kind of in the face of actual scary things like death or no, really just death. It's a celebration where all of the imagery is about death, skeletons and graves and like all of this spooky, scary stuff. But that's not the focus. We're focused on the monsters, and we're focused on the pumpkin carving and stuff like that, where death becomes just part of the narrative. And yeah, our real fears about real, actual scary things just become part of the conversation for a day.
Yeah,
and
we make it part of the game, and by playing the game, we are freed of the stresses of the real fears.
Yeah.
So Alice, we've talked a lot about kind of the background of Halloween, the ways that Halloween is kind of celebrated on a small scale, and the sort of tiny attractions that pop up because of Halloween. But now it's time to move on to the real subject here. This is a
theme park podcast.
This is a theme park podcast, and we gotta dive into how theme parks do Halloween. And I can think of no better place, now that we've spoken of our real fears and death and destruction and the hardships of winter, no better place to start than the magic of Disneyland, which seems incongruous with this idea. I mean, honestly, for all of the spookiness that Disneyland has in its attractions, such as the Haunted Mansion, it kind of seems like, wait, what? Like, Disneyland goes all out for Halloween? Why? It seems kind of antithetical, right? But Disneyland is very committed to its Halloween attractions.
Right. They definitely go all out for Halloween. They decorate the entire park head to toe in jack-o'-lanterns and ghosts and cobwebs, and they really doll the place up to make it feel very thematic. You almost feel like, even though you're in the middle of Anaheim, California, where it's going to be 80, where it is currently 80 degrees, that you are somewhere where the seasons have changed and where maybe it feels a little cooler inside the park, a little chilly.
It really is convincing. It does feel like California, Southern California especially, has seasons for once, which is such a weird concept. But, Southern Californians have to manufacture this feeling. We don't get it naturally from the changing of the leaves. So store-bought is fine in this case. But, what else do we have at Disneyland? We've got the reskin of Haunted Mansion, discussed on our previous episode, which you must go listen to. It's a great episode. And we've got a reskin of Space Mountain that makes it the Ghost Galaxy. We've got a reskin, or not a reskin, it's kind of an addition to Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout that turns it into Monsters After Dark. And then there are some other small changes to like shows and attractions as well. But the big draw is the trick-or-treating after hours event, right?
Yes, it's called Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party. It is an extra ticket to the park if you wanted to go. But it includes like games and activities and trick-or-treating for candy and treats for the kids, and as well as park hours. So the rides are all open. So but it's open just for a few hours after the park closes to the public. And it is as it says in the title, it's a not so scary Halloween party. It is the place to bring your children to go trick-or-treating and enjoy the holiday in a completely spook-free zone.
A spook-free environment. The only things that are perhaps more scary than usual are some of these reskinned rides. And maybe a couple of themed elements around the park that maybe make a noise or something. But overall, this is a baby party for babies that I remember attending when I was a kid, actually. I remember it being kind of a big deal, actually, that we did trick-or-treating at Disneyland that year, which is funny because Disneyland was like this place that we just kind of hung out. But I was very small and I remember it feeling like perfectly normal. Like, oh yeah, like here's all my friends and they're handing me candy, my Disney character friends that I know.
My best buddy, so Mickey.
it was very familiar. There's kind of a more emphasis on the villains sort of thing going on where like you'll see a couple more bad guys than usual. And that can be a little spooky, I guess, for the really small kids. But it's Disneyland. Like, how far are they going to take this? So they don't take it very far. And that's an interesting way to approach it because on the one hand, the theming is so in-depth and it really does feel like fall and a harvest and all of that. But on the other, it's just not the place to go for your traditional spooks and scares. We know Disneyland. We talk about Disneyland a lot. Disneyland's a great theme park, but here's the flip side. What sorts of things do they do at Walt Disney World where there's maybe more of an emphasis on the attraction side of things?
Right. So Disney World is more of a resort and a destination.
Yeah, you could end up spending most of Halloween week there. So what are the offerings, right? So we have a very special guest who has just returned from the Walt Disney World. We have a very special guest who has just returned from a trip to Walt Disney World. Her name is Will Williams, and she has recorded an excellent field report for us. So, Alice, do you mind if we roll that clip?
Roll that clip, buddy.
Okay, here we go.
Hey, Buddy and Alice. I love your show, And I was so happy when I saw that when I was posting about my first trip to Disney World, y'all wanted to hear from me about my experiences. I really wanted to take some audio in the park, but I was so tired and so hot and very dying. So I did not do that. But I am here now to talk about my experience. So I am from Phoenix, Arizona, and Disneyland is my home park. I didn't go a ton growing up, but I started going pretty often in college and fell deeply in love with it. And what I love about Disneyland, and you'll hear this from a lot of people who go to Disneyland, is that it's very, very atmospheric. It's almost more an attraction for me in itself than the actual attractions. I love being steeped in that world and in that whimsy. I will say that this is the thing that I missed the most when it came to Disney World. There were some parts that were really immersive, and I loved hearing your episode on immersion earlier. So I did see some of that, especially we went to the Pandora area of Animal Kingdom. That was incredible. I will also say that we popped into Toy Story Land, and I liked it. I thought it was very, very cute. But I will say that Magic Kingdom and Disney World has a completely different energy that I absolutely loved. Comparing the two parks is such an apples and oranges comparison. They're so drastically different. I didn't think that they'd be as different as they are, but I love them both to the extent where I am already planning a trip back to Disney World. One thing that I experienced that I thought was really, really interesting was we went to the Halloween party. This was a huge motivation in me going to Disney World. I have experienced Halloween at Disneyland before, but I've never been to the hard ticket after hours event there. Instead, I just went during the day and just kind of took the energy in. I think that that's the biggest difference that I can say between Disneyland and Disney World, is looking at these two different ways of experiencing Halloween. So at Disneyland, for Halloween, I went in, and pretty much my only goal was to ride Space Mountain because it's reskinned for Ghost Galaxy. I went in 2016, should be noted, and then to ride the Haunted Mansion. And I did both, but mostly what I wanted to do was walk down Main Street and look at all the shop windows. It sounds really dorky, and it is, but I love all of the meticulous details. And when you walk into Disneyland during Halloween, there is no mistaking what time of year it is. It is decked to the nines in Halloween, which I'm all about. Disney World, on the other hand, Main Street had the pumpkins and the decor and, an air of like, oh, it's Halloween, but it's much scaled back. But the difference is their Halloween party had absolutely killer programming. So we went to the Hocus Pocus show, which I am in love with. We were like right up at the front. It was amazing. It was so funny. It was so much fun. There were incredible fireworks. There was a phenomenal parade. It was so good. There was a float all for the Haunted Mansion. There was like grave diggers, and they had shovels, and it dragged across the thing, and sparks happened. God, I'm talking for so long. Anyway, purposes. Halloween is the perfect distillation of the difference between Disneyland and Disney World. In Disneyland, all I wanted to do was drink in the atmosphere and drink in the details. At Disney World, all I wanted to do was to run around, ride so many rides, maybe get some candy, look at all the merch, and take in all of the shows. It was a much more activity-focused experience than at Disneyland, where I was much more content walking around, drinking in the experience. I don't know if that is interesting at all, but one thing that is interesting is your show, which I love deeply. So thank both of you, and hopefully that wasn't too long, and I appreciate you both so much. Okay, bye!
Will, thank you so much for that excellent field report.
Thank you, Will.
Something really struck me about what Will was saying, and that is that yeah, Disneyland is kind of, we know what to expect from the Halloween party, and it's not a lot. So a lot of the times we'll end up skipping it because it again, is a baby party for babies. But what do they offer at Walt Disney World? It seems like so much more, and yet less at the same time.
Right. It seems to me that having only really been to Disney World once, that as a destination, as a resort and a place for tourists from all over the world to go to, changing the park outright, just reskinning entire rides for 4 months out of a time, like Haunted Mansion Holiday, just wouldn't fly. Some people save up for their entire lives to afford to take their families to Disney World. So you can't change anything that much. But they instead, I think, focus on different kinds of like Epcot throws so many different kinds of festivals over the year to keep it fresh, but without actually changing anything.
Right. And there's this kind of attitude that like certain things cannot be changed. They're too sacred. So let's not mess with the overall look of the park too much, to a degree where people are like, I guess it's always going to be in my vacation photos. It's always going to be Halloween. Or, I guess we'll never ride the real Haunted Mansion because we'll never be here again. Instead, there's more of a focus on like, what can we add on top? What can we add as well? We can add these big shows. We can add these bigger parties after hours, but we can't really go for the change in theming that they go for in California, where I feel like the attraction of the park, while it is a global attraction that does get many international guests, it seems a little bit more focused on locals.
Right. They have so many annual pass holders and so many people that return on the weekly or monthly basis that they can make those changes to keep it fresh. The Disneyland has spent a lot of time catering to annual pass holders, that they want to keep things fresh and new and change them up all the time for the return visitors. Which is, it's really interesting to me how these two parks owned by the same company run so differently.
Yeah, they truly do have their own identities, especially when it comes to how they approach the holidays. And, I'm not going to pretend that I know exactly what the motivation is over at Disney parks and what they're thinking. But it does seem to me that Disneyland feels it has the freedom and has the clout to kind of just be like, we can do whatever we want. We're Disneyland. Like, let's go for it. Whereas Disney World is playing it a little safer. It's a very consistent holiday resort that you're going to visit not as often, even though, yes, Walt Disney World does have its own army of annual pass holders. It's more focused on the international crowd. And so that changes the flavor of the way that they engage with the holiday. So overall, Will, thank you so much for that great field report. And honestly, how could we ever know unless we heard from somebody else, like, how exactly this works? We can't be visiting Walt Disney World all the time. So thank you so much for sharing your trip with us.
Shall we move on to other theme parks and Halloween attractions?
Alice, I think we shall. So we were just talking about how Disneyland is kind of a more local attraction, but I'd like to go one level more local. Maybe about 3 levels more local.
3 levels more local. To talk about one of our very favorite places here at Those Happy Places. We're going back to Knott's Berry Farm.
Knott's Berry Farm is so fantastic, you guys. And I always get excited when we get to talk about it because that theme park has so much character. And one of the things that makes it so unique, maybe not nowadays, but maybe has historically made it unique, is the Halloween overlay that it gets every year.
Yeah, Knott's has been doing theming for Halloween since 1973. It claims to be one of the very first theme parks to do a special Halloween event, where it used to be just like 3 nights at the end of the month, is now a full month affair called Knott's Scary Farm.
Oh my gosh. I am so excited that it is still called Knott's Scary Farm. And even after the Cedar Fair buyout, there was a period when it was known as Halloween Haunt, and that was how it was advertised. And some official materials still call it the Knott's Scary Farm Halloween Haunt. But Scary Farm was such a stuck title that it went right back to being the official name of the event, which
we those of us who were local, we never stopped calling it Scary Farm. I think the only people I know who call it Halloween Haunt or ever called it Halloween Haunt were people that worked there.
Exactly, and it would have been official terminology. It's kind of like calling Walt Disney World instead of just Disney World,
right?
Where it's something that we like say because we're told to say it that way, but not Scary Farm is this local colloquialism that eventually won, and I love stories like that. So Alice, you went to Knott's Scary Farm.
I did. I went last night. It is very fresh in my mind.
And the one thing that you sent me while you were there said, "I'm very spooked."
Yeah, I managed to get one text out in between all of my screaming. Just, I'm very spooked. Because I was. Man, talk about a full reversal from Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party. Knott's Scary Farm does not shy away from the spooks and scares. They do a full overlay of the entire park. They shut it down for an hour and a half after closing and reopen it, and you have to get a separate ticket, again, like Mickey's. And they reopen the park. All of the rides are running. But the entire inside of the park is now themed and lit to be the scariest thing. It's so much fun. You can't walk, 15 feet in that park without seeing a employee dressed up as some kind of monster jumping out of a shadow to scare people. It's they have this one stretch right when you enter Ghost Town, where they've got this big bright spotlight that is so bright that you can't see where you're going, and the whole hallway is filled with fog, and they just have people hiding in the fog ready to just jump out at you and snap their fingers in your face or growl in your ear or something to scare you as you're trying to make it from one end of the park to the other. It's horrifying, and it was delightful.
Yeah, it's kind of a tradition, maybe even a rite of passage, for teenagers to be like, okay, we're going to Scary Farm and we're gonna do all the mazes.
The mazes.
And there, I remember when we went in high school, trying to put on this I'm too cool to be scared act. And
not me. I've always been a huge baby.
Right, but there's that social pressure. No,
I'm gonna be tough. I'm totally tough enough to walk through these mazes and get scared. I'm not gonna cry in front of my friends.
Yeah, no, that's not how it worked out for you.
No.
But so it's the combination of the overlay and then the addition of these new attractions in the form of the mazes, right? Which are kind of themed mini scare haunted houses things.
They're called mazes, but they're walkthroughs. It's follow this twisty turny path through this very scary scene that we've laid out. It's almost like a dark ride, except you don't ride, you walk, where it's just show scene after show scene after show scene that you willingly walk your body through to get from one end to the other without crying or running through an emergency exit.
And if you can't willingly make your body walk through it, then you're stuck, and that's even worse somehow. So yeah, it's an exciting change to the theme park dynamic, right? Because we still have the rides, and Knott's Berry Farm has all of its roller coasters and its other various and sundry thrill rides, and those are all slightly different too, or some of them are, anyways.
Right. They change two rides specifically. They do up for Halloween, do a little Halloween overlay, the Calico Mine Train and the Log Flume. So these rides do a little bit of an overlay on the inside where the Log Flume, for example, becomes the Halloween Hootenanny. And it is kind of a party type celebration added onto the ride with a little bit of spooks and scares. And at night they add employees like members, like I keep wanting to say cast members, but that's what they call them at Disney. But I guess it's they're the
They
cast
are a
of
cast in that
Scary
way,
Farm.
aren't they?
Now they're
Yeah.
a cast. Yeah, you're right. So these cast members dressed up as various monsters do jump out at you and growl and scream and make scary noises and stuff while you're on this ride, which is normally just a log flume.
Right.
And so, but but the rest of the park is just your typical roller coaster park, except they do all of the like nighttime lighting all up in like red lights to make everything look extra spooky. And so we're riding Supreme Scream like normal, like we would normally do, and instead of the bright white lights up at the top of the tower, it's red and green, and it's eerie now. It's becomes just a little bit more scary and themed. So you can ride these roller coasters, and I love roller coasters, and I demanded to ride a couple of roller coasters last night instead of just walking through all the mazes, because I needed to like give myself a break from all the scares. Like I said, I'm a huge baby, but I was being a grown-up, and I walked through. We did 6 out of the 9 mazes while we were there, and 9 entire mazes. That's a massive amount of extra theming, extra attractions added to this park.
It's almost a whole second theme park on top of it all.
Right. And some of the lines were kind of long, and some of them we just walked right into. We stayed until closing. We were there until 1 o'clock in the morning. And at the end of the park, we just knocked out like 1, 2, 3 mazes right after the other with no wait time. And to walk through the like maze itself maybe takes 3 or 4 minutes to walk through, but it feels so long. Around every other corner is another scary scene or cast member jumping out at you, and but they all have plots to tell, like stories to tell. They're not just, oh, look at something gruesome, but they're like giving you a story to follow. One of them was the story of you were on a spaceship with a crew, and then as you keep walking through the spaceship, the quarantine breaks and all of these alien viruses get out, and the crew is like, at one point they had like a dummy body laying on the ground with like alien monsters coming out of its belly, like a scene from Alien. And then in the next scene you see like a cast members walking around with their alien tentacles, like prosthetics coming out of their guts, and they're like, help, and so you're and then they become full-blown like alien monsters, and then they're chasing you through the rest of the spaceship as you're like, as a couple of safe crew members are going, go, get out.
Oh my God.
And so it's this like plot, it's a story that they're getting you to walk through and experience, and it's just really fun. It's very scary, but very, very fun.
It's funny the way that it sounds kind of like, the usual story structure of maybe a dark ride, where there's a couple of scenes that you are moved through, but the difference is the immediacy and the way that it's interactive because of the human element. Not interactive because of say great technology use, or interactive because like your perspective matters, but it's interactive because it's happening to you and other humans are making it happen. So it is a one-of-a-kind, one-time thing when you go through.
I'm going to jump back a couple of sentences. Buddy, it's incredibly interactive, not just because of that. The tech and everything, and they literally had one. We didn't get to do it. The line was really long. Where they gave you like little laser guns, and it was like a game that you played while you walked through, shooting these like targets and stuff on these monsters. And it was a literal interactive game with a lost state. Like you could there was like actual danger feeling in that. You could die. You could lose. You could have not shot enough monsters, and then they were like, oh no, like the monsters are going to get you if you don't shoot them enough. I don't know if you got a score at the end or anything, but like if you weren't playing the game, the monsters were chasing you and going to eat you. Like
Wow.
it's proper interactive and actually terrifying.
Weren't you telling me about a really cool use of technology in the Trick or Treat house?
Oh my gosh. I can't stop gushing about this. They gave us flashlights before we walked in, and these flashlights were like our only source of light through this entire haunted house. And it was structured like a typical Victorian haunted house. They had show scenes where it was like a little kid's bedroom with a bunch of creepy dolls on the wall, but like in long Victorian nightgowns, you know, and they had a lady dressed all in black standing around like a pentacle, and they were doing like seances and stuff. It was very Victorian, very spooky, but the light in your hand was the only light. So whatever you chose to shine your light on is what you would see. And if you were brave enough to shine it around the whole room, you could see more scares. But as you kept going, the flashlight would flicker on and off. And then in one of the rooms, the flashlight became a black light. It became a purple light and would illuminate like scary symbols and stuff written on the walls, and a painting turned into a spooky painting when you shined your black light on it. And then at the very end, your flashlight became a strobe light, which made walking really hard. And then it vibrated violently in my hand as if it was like a don't go, like kind of thing. And everybody else's lights were strobing at different intervals and stuff. And that one, like they use strobe lights all the time in that park. So like if you were epileptic or anything, like you could not go anywhere near.
Not the best environment for those sensitive to light. No.
Not very accessible. But the strobe lights and everything, and the vibrating, and then somebody popping out at the last minute to scream in your face, like it was so immersive, and it was so awesome. It was incredibly immersive and detailed and high tech and like really truly interactive. This like what you see is what you choose to point your flashlight at makes everybody's experience through that walkthrough different. I saw the like witch lady standing around like with the pentagram drawn on the ground and everything. Like I saw her, but my fiance didn't, because he was looking at something else in the room. And
oh my gosh, that even makes it like more scary. Like she was there, but he didn't see.
Right? It was terrifying and so much fun. And I know Knott's isn't the only theme park that does this kind of thing. Universal Studios and Six Flags and even smaller local parks will do like even like smaller than Knott's local parks will do this kind of thing. But there was something so incredibly charming about the Knott's Scary Farm branding, about how everybody that works there is a local, and they're really just kind of like local college kids or like longtime regulars, people have been working there for like 10-20 years, who just keep coming back because the culture of working there and the culture of being at that park is so fun. And it has become so much a part of this area that we live in, or that I live in. You need to come back. It takes this entire city, this entire part of Southern California, and everybody's got some connection to it. Everybody knows somebody that works at Scary Farm, or we all go once a year because, and I haven't been for a while, but I was like, I remember this being mad scary fun when we were in high school. Let's go try it again. Let's see if I can be braver this time. And they change the mazes up every year. So it's like I got to go back and see what new stuff they added and what ones they took out, and which classics remain. And if I can see the same monsters I remember from last year, it becomes like a game or like a collection that you just, it's so personal and it's so specific to this area of California. It's wonderful.
Other places may do it bigger with more budgets and more recognizable IPs, but for me, Knott's Scary Farm is the place.
Yeah.
It just feels right. Alice, I think that means that our conversation about Halloween and Halloween's effect on theme parks and themed spaces has come to a close.
I think you're right, buddy. But before we go, we want to send some thanks to some fabulous listeners, and us most especially to our amazing contributor for this episode, Will Williams. Will, thank you so much for sending in that voicemail. It means so much to us that you listen and that you thought of us, and that you wanted to add your voice to our story tonight.
Now, Will Williams is a great friend and contributor, but also she is a pillar of the podcasting community. She writes reviews and news. She has a website. It's at willwilliams.reviews. And Will Williams is spelled WILWILLIAMS. And she does reviews of podcasts. She does a newsletter that you can sign up for. And she's also half of the team of Tuned In Dialed Up, which is an amazing podcast about podcasts that I've recently become a huge fan of. And she and Gavin, aka the Pod Report, who has featured on this podcast before, do reviews of podcasts. They also do recommendations to each other. It is a very fun, punny, and yes, it is full of puns. Listen, and I giggle along the entire time, Alice. It is just, it feels like you're in the room, just hanging out with your friends, just joshing about podcasts, and it's so good. So Will, again, thank you so much for that contribution.
Yes, thank you, Will. I just wanted to give a quick thanks to Katie and Anne, and of course to TH Ponders, some of our favorite listeners who have recently joined our Discord server.
Wait, we've got a Discord server?
We sure do, buddy. Those Happy Places is on Discord, and if you're interested in joining us in conversation, right now we're talking about, the conversation right now is about Universal Studios, but we have conversations about Disney and Knott's and other theme parks, and also just some general muckery that you can join in on. You can find information about how to jump on our Discord on our Twitter accounts.
That's right. I'm at Buddy_Duquesne, and Duquesne is spelled DUQUESNE.
And I'm at Alice White THP for Those Happy Places.
And if you do one thing this week to help the podcast grow or to tell other people about the podcast, let it be the Discord server. We really, really want to start a conversation with a bunch of listeners and kind of build this community of people who take theme parks not too seriously, but more seriously as an art form and as a collective expression of culture than maybe other people do. So we want to form that group of people, and we want you to be a part of it.
Absolutely. But if Discord's not your thing, you can always find us on Twitter. We're constantly tweeting. And join us the conversation there. And if you listen to this episode and if you liked it, drop us a review, recommend it to your friends, and drop us a tweet. Say hi and let us know that you're listening.
Yeah. Alice, did you know that if our audience is listening to us right now, then they're probably also hearing our theme music?
Our theme music, would that be called Golden Gate by the California Feetwarmers featuring Phil Alvin?
Why, yes, it is. Did you know that you could find the Feetwarmers at www.californiafeetwarmers.com?
I did know that, but now everyone does too. Buddy, how about any additional music for this episode?
Ooh, Alice, I'm thinking if there's any additional music that the listeners heard, it was probably by Podington Bear, and his work is available through the Free Music Archive, www.freemusicarchive.org. Podington Bear is an amazing, prolific composer, and his music is available for free for podcasters to make use of in their podcasts. So thank you, Podington Bear.
Yes, you make us sound real good every week. So thank you for listening, everybody. And Buddy, thank you so much for doing this episode with me.
Alice, thank you for going out and doing that field report, and thank you for being such an excellent co-host.
It was very spooky and scary, but I made it through.
I'm so proud of you. Thank you for listening, and we hope you return to those happy places.